But first, the murder of Stephen Restorick in Bessbrook has cast its gloom and depression in the world of politics as on the street. John Major accuses Sinn Féin of deadly hypocrisy. Sinn Féin say if the killing focuses attention on what they call the real problems, the death will not be in vain. With me to discuss the way forward in our Foyle studio, Sinn Féin's Mitchell McLaughlin, and with me here the SDLP Deputy Leader, Seamus Mallon. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Mitchell McLaughlin, how long can the Republican movement continue with the charade of talking peace but acting war?
Well, Sinn Féin has a political project which is to bring about a negotiating process, and we will stay focused on that project until we achieve it.
Seamus Mallon, you're the constituency MP. Once again, it's brought the spotlight of murder onto South Armagh.
Yes, I walked through the streets of Bessbrook last night. I could hear my feet on the grounds. It was exactly the same streets that 21 years ago I walked in after the Kingsmills murders. What has been learned in that last 21 years? There we had atrocity at Kingsmills and those funerals. Last night in the darkness of Bessbrook, a young man's life was taken away. And it is the appalling vista that we have at the present moment of time, that despite that 21-year period of Irish history, that the one single lesson has not been learned, and that lesson is violence solves nothing.
Mitchell McLaughlin, when we spoke after the Thiepval bomb, you said that the IRA members had a vision. What kind of vision of the future is it which includes the murder of 23-year-old men?
Well, in my opinion, there is actually a common vision. Everyone that I know of wants to see a peaceful settlement, and they want to see that arrived at through negotiations between the people to whom they have given a mandate.
So we kill people until we get
it. As well, and I believe that members of the unionist community and members of the broader nationalist community in this island share. The difficulty for us all is that having constructed an opportunity to have those negotiations and been frustrated, and having done that twice in the last 2 years, that we have a situation that people are waiting until a stronger British government is ensconced at Westminster that would be prepared to join in that search.
And in the meantime, if a few people have to die, so what? Is that what you're saying?
Of course I'm not saying that, but in the meantime, the conflict situation continues. It will only change when the political process takes over, and I think that most objective observers would accept that the political process has failed us all in the last 2 years. And we see the charade that's going on at Westminster, we see the charade at Stormont, and clearly the political process is failing.
Seamus Mallon, where is the greater charade, in the peace process or in the Republican movement?
Well, could I make one central point, because it is a political point? I'm not going to ask for condemnation because I know it will not be made. I'm not even going to talk about the morality of violence because I know what the answer is going to be. But surely the hardcore political reality is that violence cannot solve political problems. Now, is that accepted by Mitchell or is it not? If it is, and the answer to that is yes or no. If the answer to that violence cannot solve political problems now or in the future, then let him take this opportunity of saying that and saying that clearly. No ambiguity whatsoever. Say it to your viewers and to the people listening so that in effect it may have some impact on those who are planning and carrying out violence like we saw last night. You cannot simply park yourself halfway between peace on the one hand and violence on the other, blame everybody else for failure without recognising that the party that Mitchell belongs to still hasn't given an answer to that. And I ask him once again, can you solve political problems by violence? And if you cannot, then will he ask people to stop it and stop it now so that we can start to make a success of the
Mitchell McLaughlin, will you accept that invitation?
Well, I mean, for 1 minute, I don't accept that Seamus Mallon doesn't understand our position. Violence is the outcome of political failure. He knows that as well as I know it. And
but the question is, can you
make I'm going to give you the answer. Now, just
through violence?
You allowed Seamus to make his point, and it's a very crucial point. I'm saying that there's no ambiguity, neither is there misunderstanding. Sinn Féin stood at the door waiting for the negotiations to begin for 17 months when there wasn't any alibis of political violence from Republicans. And the political system and the other political parties, none of them were capable of moving the British government into a position where those negotiations could begin. Despite the frustration and the difficulties caused by the breakdown in the IRA cessation, my party went back to work. And we produced, in conjunction with the leader of Seamus Mallon's party, a proposition that we put to the British government in the autumn of last year. And again, John Major spurned it. So our position is quite clear. You will not solve the problems through violence. The problems will be solved through negotiations. And we've been attempting to get into negotiations for a very long time.
Let me move on. What do you read into?
No, I'm not going to move on. I asked a question and I would like an answer. It's a very simple question. Does Mitchell McLaughlin and his party believe that political problems can be solved by violence? If they're saying that they do not believe that it can, then surely they have a bounden responsibility to say that and to call on those who are using violence to stop it. Otherwise, the young man that was shot dead last night, the other people who have been maimed and injured, the people who were killed in Canary Wharf, the people who were killed in Thiepval Barracks, they are all victims, not for some ideology, but as part of a Sinn Féin IRA strategy. Now, that is the reality of the situation. And Mitchell, you know, no amount of blaming everybody else can get away from the reality that that lad last night was caught in the sights of a gun held by someone in the Republican movement. It was premeditated. It was determined that that young man should die, and die for what? To advance your political argument? Because unless you give me an answer to this question, then they are evading the core political element, not the moral element, not the judgmental element, but the core political element of your position.
Well, I'll
Could we
repeat the
try
answer I
again
gave
and
you
get
5
an
minutes
answer?
ago. You will not solve problems through violence. Problems are solved by elected representatives
Then you
entering into
stop
negotiations.
violence and anybody
Well,
using
we are
to stop.
attempting, Seamus, to bring, in conjunction with your leader, and I wish he was getting more consistent support in this, in conjunction with your leader, we are attempting to bring those negotiations forward. And we've been frustrated so far by John Major's obsession with political survival at Westminster and by the intransigence of the Unionists. I have to say that. If the IRA killed that soldier last night, I expect them to accept responsibility for their actions. In the meantime, my party leader and your party leader will attempt to make sure it never happens again. That young soldier didn't have to die if John Major had taken up the option of negotiation instead of war.
He was killed, of course, by a sniper, not by a politician. But is not the logical extension of your acceptance of Seamus Mallon's point that there will come a point where Sinn Féin will have to divorce itself from the IRA? If you say no political problem can be solved through violence, how can you still be associated with
What
people
I'm
who
saying
don't believe that?
What I'm saying, Noel, is that negotiations are inevitable. They're going to happen anyway. And when they happen, we're going to conduct them in a manner which will be conductive to producing a solution, a permanent settlement, and then to political violence in our society.
Mallon, what about the argument that it's the SDLP's close work with Sinn Féin, it's the Hume Adams talks, the Hume Adams initiative, which perhaps has encouraged the violent end of republicanism to say, hey, this works?
Well, it's strange logic, of course, that when someone tries to create peace, they're seen as encouraging the IRA towards violence.
Well, leave Sinn Féin behind, John Bruton said this week. Leave them behind.
Look, let's talk about this. Seamus Mallon, you addressed the question to. I'll answer it. I think there is a responsibility, and Mitchell and his colleagues have to face it. And the responsibility is, having actually admitted that violence is not going to solve political problems, then to openly tell the IRA that they must stop because that is the case. Now, you cannot have a comfort zone provided by John Hume on the one hand, and the certainty of violence on the other. Because the more violence, the more there's a breakage in terms of the type of ceasefire that we had, the more less space there is for anybody, be it John Hume or anybody within this society, to try and create the type of climate where peace will work.
Seamus, could I
Surely you realise, no, you've had your innings.
But you asked me a question, I'd like to put one to you.
You will have a chance to answer it, Mr. McLaughlin.
Surely you realise that the single most important factor in Northern Irish life at the moment is the way in which continuing violence for 27 years has sapped confidence out of the community, hope out of the community. imbued the type of despair that I saw in the streets of Bessbrook last night, and created this type of attitudes which showed themselves very clearly last summer, because it was the poison of that violence building up over so many years that we saw pouring out right throughout those summer months.
Okay, let me ask.
Now, you have a responsibility, Mitchell. You cannot hide it with honeyed words. Will you please accept that responsibility?
Well, let me deal with the point you're making and put a question to you, Seamus. We addressed this question that political violence would not solve the problems by arguing and getting the IRA to accept that negotiations was the way in which those problems could be solved. And they accepted that argument when they announced in August of '94 that they would call a cessation of their military activity. We didn't get the negotiations. We repackaged that. We re-entered into discussions with your party leader, and we presented a proposal to John Major in October of last year. John Major responded that an IRA cessation was not enough, that there wouldn't be negotiations. So the people who are creating the difficulties in this process are not Republicans, and Republicans have no difficulty in recognising that these problems will only be solved permanently through a process of negotiations. And that's our position, and we will continue to present that argument until we find a British government, and for that matter, an Irish government, that's prepared to recognise that it's through a process of the elected representatives of the people of Ireland sitting around a table.
I want to ask Seamus Malin a question very quickly.
Well, that is the question.
Just what is the question?
That is it.
I've asked Seamus.
I'll
He
answer the
knows.
question.
He knows where the problem is, and he knows. And I asked him
let me tell you what I know.
With John
Very
Major.
quickly.
Let me tell you what I know. John Major made a mistake not once, but twice. Because John Major, a British Prime Minister, makes a mistake, doesn't mean
Well, we
that
were calling him
that
today,
Irish
then they sit
people
down and talk.
should be killing people because a British Prime Minister makes a mistake.
Seamus, would you
Now,
call him
there's
the
possibility-
authorisers of
there's
officials
the
to start
possibility of
voting
your
Sinn Féin
position.
immediately?
And the reality is that no matter whom you blame, be it the SDLP, the Irish government, John Major, or whoever, the people who are not saying to others, stop this violence, are yourself, Mitchell, and your colleagues. That is your most bounden responsibility as of now.
But would you not recognise that there's a value in political leaders like you and the Irish government addressing the problem where it resides? And that is asking John Major to authorise contact and discussions with Sinn Féin so that we can actually deal with those problems that prevent us moving into negotiation. All of that will feed back into an argument that will create a logic
Some of
for
us,
the IRA
some of us have been doing this for 27 years.
I'm happy to hear you saying it now, Seamus.
Seamus Malin and Mitchell McLaughlin, we must end it there. Thank you both very much indeed.